Hey there beautiful people, how's everything? Just a little heads up before we start the video. First, yes, there's going to be spoilers regarding the work being discussed. But hold up a second, before you throw your Wi-Fi router or cell phone out of the window, let me just say something. Although I may reveal some plot points, like the fact that Bruce Willis is a ghost in Die Hard, or that John Wick goes back in time to avoid flunking history,
No way!
the whole emotional impact, the quality of the story, and the relevance of the events will be maintained. So it won't be that much of a problem if you know a thing or two beforehand. In other words, the intent of this video is not to tell the plot, but to use it as a way to approach the themes that the story addresses. If you have already seen, played or read whatever it is we are talking about and realize that I left out some details, that's the reason. Although, rest assured, if you decide to leave this video for later, I'll understand. I mean it. I'll still love you. Second, if you really want it, I'd love that you like this video, share it and subscribe, as well as follow on Twitter and Instagram. It would mean the world to me, really, but then again, only if you feel like it. Usually, the analysis of any work starts by its beginning, be it the first page or the first episode. But since we're talking about Shera, the origin happens a little bit before that. More precisely, in 1982. Now, visualize the scene. Mark Ellis, marketing director at Mattel, was in a conference with delegates of the biggest toy stores of the United States. He had just finished presenting the newest line of action figures, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, saying that, besides commercials, there was going to be a graphic novel from DC as a way to advertise the toys. One of the delegates stands up, says that children don't know how to read, and asks if there's going to be something else to promote the toy line. It was then that Mark revealed the preparations of a few cartoons for TV. The conference is a success and expectations are high. The problem was that Mark kinda lied, you know? Nothing regarding any animation was prepared or discussed with anyone. And it was right there that the Masters of the Universe cartoon was born. Actually no, needed to be born. Even though it started as a lie told right on time, the series was a success as absurd as unexpected. The adventures of Prince Adam, who, with his catchphrase,
"By the power of Grayskull!"
becomes the legendary He-Man, dominated the cultural space between 1982 and 1987, leaving an eternal mark on the popular imagination and having his series as one of the most influential animations in history. The plot holds a very simple proposal, but one with almost infinite possibilities. Being the prince of the planet Eternia, Adam must face the forces of Skeletor, which in Portuguese is simply called Skull. But you know, in Portuguese like esqueleto. I know that's kinda lame. Who wants to conquer the castle Grayskull and, by doing so, conquer the planet. Never before there was a cartoon that, in only one season, was composed of a whopping 65 episodes and dared to ignore the Saturday morning time frame, in favor of airing every day of the week. And that's not even considering that the main objective of the work, which was, you know, selling toys, was gloriously achieved. More about this idea of selling stuff on the video about Avatar and the history of animation show up there when I, finish translating it. And the numbers brought an unexpected surprise. From the wholesales of the Masters of the Universe toy line, a product directed mainly at the masculine public, 30 to 40% were designated for girls. Those surprising numbers, allied with the fact that Barbie stagnated as a result of problems in the market of dolls, were the reasons that motivated Mattel to prepare a new line of toys and cartoons for girls, only this time focused on action and adventure. And so, Shera came to be. In this story, which takes place in the planet Etheria, we follow Princess Adora, Adam's twin sister who, by being magically controlled, fights for a group called the Evil Horde, headed by Hardek. Which, being called that, one can only guess what side are they on. After receiving a magical sword from her brother and having the spell broken, she starts to battle in the name of the Great Rebellion. Though it was a huge success, unfortunately not in the same scope as the main series, Shera's biggest mistake was being released in 1985, close to the moment of general saturation of the brand, which happened in 1987. Although still being strongly known for the quality and popularity, both the series and the toy lines were leaving behind the indisputable control and influence over the market and pop culture. And with all that cultural and historical baggage, the new series searches for the answer of a complicated question: how to leave one's almost whole past behind and try to change. It is something pretty peculiar when both the characters of a story and the very work that holds said story share the same problem. It may seem a little abstract, but let me tell you how you, yes, you, beautiful person, can sympathize with that. Do you have any moments in your life that define how you came to be perceived by and which expectations your peers had about you? Can be your school, your college, your first work, or even an event that a lot of people came to know. It doesn't have to be something that you could interfere. Most of the time those events are out of our control, like the conditions in which we were born. But okay, just like our identity, more precisely the opinions that others have regarding us can be a product of the environment and time where and when we happen to exist, a work of art can have its identity and purpose justified by the context of its creation, and that's what happened with Shera. The classic series was a byproduct of a product of a time, having as an end goal the simple publicity of a toy. Its objective was to satisfy the wishes of the market. Anything more than that was a convenient bonus, and that was its reason to be. But look, we are not in 1985 anymore. The world has changed, the people have changed, and so have their creations. It is possible for something to go beyond the purpose of its creation and the expectations that other people have. Can someone, or better yet, something, deny its destiny? Well, I do believe that is one of the things that the new Shera talks about, and that's what we are going to talk about. Okay guys, let's make a quick synopsis of the series. The world of Etheria is separated among kingdoms. Some of those have runestones that allow their leaders to connect with the planet and siphon one aspect of the nature's elements. Guys, the princesses touch the stone and they can freeze stuff or hit people with plants. It's not that complicated. Although it may share some aspects of the original work, the new series uses the known concepts and takes them to new directions. Of course, Adora is Shera and Etheria continues to be under siege by the Horde, but both the world and the characters have brand new layers that simply did not exist. Instead of receiving her supposed destiny from someone else and accept willingly and perfectly the role of defender, it's Adora herself that has agency over her actions and finds the sword. However, even though she accepts the duty of doing something for the world, her insecurities and fears are always present.
It's okay, you'll get it soon.
Soon isn't good enough. These people expect me to save their land. I thought I was better as Shera, but I'm useless no matter what form I take.
And it's in the aspect of being under the shadow of the past that the plot shows its first theme. See, the story starts way after the monumental failure that was the last alliance against the Horde, and is among this atmosphere of hopelessness and indifference that our heroes try to prove that the events of the past are not fated to repeat. And it's not only the bigger plot that the theme makes itself present. All the characters carry with them the burden of inheriting a legacy over which they had no say besides accepting. Adora doesn't decide to be Shera, it's pushed towards her.
Don't I get a say in what happens to me? Don't I get a choice?
No, this is your destiny. You do not choose. You were chosen.
Princess Mermista had no voice over the decision that made hers a decaying kingdom. Princess Scorpia was born long after her kingdom and the throne that was hers by right were given to the Horde. Even the notion that the great conflict that is happening is being fought by a generation that wasn't even born when it started reflects that. Yet, even more thematically relevant for this work is the matter of expectations. And, more importantly, how they can be broken and how that affects us. From the beginning of the plot, the story shows many moments in which the characters are confronted with what is expected from them and what they expect from the others. A good example is Adora herself, who has spent her whole life having the Horde as her family and home, believing that the rest of the world was chaotic and corrupted, until the day when she could see the reality with her own eyes and question her loyalty.
This doesn't make any sense. The Horde would never do something like this.
Did you really not know any of this? I mean, your army is called the Evil Horde.
Who calls us that?
Everybody!
Furthermore, the villain himself is a great example of, well, he's a great example of a character in general, but also regarding how it is possible to change the way we see something or someone. Hordak, whose presence is initially enigmatic, authoritarian, and controlling, gradually gives place to something more melancholic, tragic, and fragile. We reach a point where the purpose of the world itself and the mysterious precursor people, the first ones, whose ruins and technologies left behind are some of the central points of the plot, also fit in the notion concerning how the expectations that we have regarding what surrounds us can't be wrong. Nevertheless, far from heroic deeds or the destiny of the world, the intimacy of the characters also carries a strong relevance on the thematic construction of the series. We have the character of Queen Angela, commander of the rebellion and the Kingdom of Brightmoon, who is an angelical being and practically immortal. However, she's a widow as well and tries to conciliate her political duties and the raising of her daughter, Princess Glimmer. Although she sees herself trying to appear powerful and in command, she can also be seen spending her sleepless nights walking alone through her castle, observing the murals that portray her deceased husband.
Who is that?
King Micah, my husband. He built the rebellion with me, and he was one of the first casualties of the Horde.
That shows something just too important to address later, which is the way the show empowers the honesty with yourself and with those you love. The main line that separates heroes from villains is the capacity of facing their weakness and mistakes, of being better today than they were yesterday. True heroes are not afraid to question themselves, face their past, and open their hearts. In other words, they are not afraid to cry. The first time that I watched the second season, I didn't think much of it. Don't get me wrong, it's as good as any other, but it's much more focused on the character development than the progression of the plot. And I, stupid as I was, consider that a low point. As it happens, this short season utilizes really well its time, deepening the ties between characters, showing how the bonds that one has can shape oneself. It becomes clear since the start of the first episode, which displays the ways that positive and healthy influence have completely changed the character of Frosta, when compared to her personality in the previous season.
I remind you of you? Ugh, and I even sounded like my mom when I yelled at you. Please don't make me do that again. Deal.
But okay guys, the real highlight goes to the demonstration of how toxic and negative bonds can weaken and hurt someone, using as an example Adora's best friend, rival, and some other things. Catra. Catra and Adora are best friends since childhood, growing up together under the command of the Horde, and having the character Shadow Weaver not only as a mentor, but as a motherly figure as well. However, this relation reveals itself deeply toxic, being based on an evident favoritism for Adora, which marks Catra in such a way that makes her feel the need to be constantly on control and to prove superiority over everyone else. One of the reasons behind her behavior is the deep fear of being abandoned. When Adora runs away from the Horde to join the rebellion, Catra considers that a personal attack, not because she feels angry, but because she feels sad for believing to have been left by the one she loved the most. However, after surpassing her mentor and becoming the Horde's second in command, her emotional frailty and lack of affection becomes quite evident, seeing as she still longs for Shadow Weaver's approval and positive reinforcement, even though her old mentor is now locked up and completely defeated. And the same sensation that she felt when Adora left comes back when she's fooled by, and in fact abandoned by, Shadow Weaver, who uses her to architect her escape. This shows how years of emotional violence can cause dependencies and wounds that the passage of time, by itself, simply cannot heal. Not to mention that said abuses have put Catra in a state where she not only hurts herself, but also those who mean well. And beautiful people, in case you wanna see a series that focuses quite well on the effects that a negative parental relation can have, take a look at the Umbrella Academy, it's super duper. As a counterpart, we have the character of Bo, who, together with Glimmer, is one of Adora's best friends and a fundamental part of the rebellion. Similar to other characters in the series, he carries with him the drama of having the perspective of following a path that simply wasn't chosen by him. His parents hold the dream that he becomes a great historian and takes care of the family's library. As a matter of fact, besides wanting something for him, there is something that they simply do not wish, which is seeing him involved with the rebellion, and the reason behind that is that his father fought in the failed struggle of the last alliance.
You're too young to remember the first failed Princess Alliance. I'm not. I enlisted, fought for what I thought was right.
Dad, can we not?
And when I came home, There was nothing left of my village but ash. I vowed then that my family would never get mixed up in fighting or the princesses again.
However, serving as a direct contrast of the negative relations that exist among the villains, in the moment that the truth comes out and the feelings are externalized, the divergences and broken expectations are treated with affection and comprehension.
What's breaking our hearts is the fact that you thought you had to lie about who you are.
You're not mad? But I'm a fighter, and you hate fighters.
I could never hate you. Never.
And since we are on the subject of both parents, let's address something that, whenever discussing Shera, we cannot ignore. You see, when I say both parents, I mean dads, like 2 dudes.
Adora, Glimmer, meet my dads.
Adora, Glimmer.
Okay, now listen. In Portuguese, I make a killer joke here. The word for parents, which is pais, literally means dads. So, during this whole segment, I would be referring to them as dads and no one would notice. But it just doesn't work here, because of English. Something that the new Shera series undeniably shares with its ancestor, the Masters of the Universe, is the revolutionization of what is expected to be shown in an animation. It is already public and notorious the ethnical, physical and sexual diversity of the series' characters. What may not be known is the quality presented in the way said diversity is shown. A negatively interesting aspect is the ambiguity in the representation of homo-affectionate relationships in animation, having as exemplar cases Avatar: The Legend of Korra and Voltron, where the respective creators had to comment on the internet to make it clear that, indeed, the characters were together romantically. I'm not going to take away the merits of those cartoons, I love them both so very much, but we cannot deny that said relationships were not shown with the same manner of clarity and focus when compared to the ones more orthodox. Another relevant point is the literary trope of burying your gays, where the LGBTQ+ characters are basically considered more expendable. You know the trope that the black guy dies first in the horror movies? It's like that. And thinking about it now, while comparing to the history of horror literature, one can see a little bit of structural racism there. Interesting. As I said before, in a yet-to-be-translated video, there's a strong difference between the terms representativity and protagonism. Making a more semantic analysis of the words, represent stands for being seen or being the symbol for something. In our case, we use as a concept someone being present. Protagonism, in its turn, holds the idea of importance and being the center of attention. For our conversation, we use the notion of being the main agent. Okay guys, after using fancy words like ooh, semantic, let's use a little example, highlighting the game that is a synonym for cultural diversity. That's right, Mortal Kombat. A kinda lame representation can be seen in the first game of the series, which has, among all those dudes, one single lady, Sonya Blade. Look, I said it was an example, but I didn't say it was a good one. Nevertheless, on the 10th game of the franchise, we see an actual great demonstration of protagonism, having the character of Cassie Cage not as an extra or the girl of the group, but as the main hero of the story. And who would have thought that we'd live to see Mortal Kombat being a story with a cast that is both diverse and well written.
There lies ahead a brighter path, one that will truly honor your ancestors, one that is worthy of you. Go to the Wuxi Academy, join the Shaolin, like Kung Lao before you.
I can't. They won't accept.
They care only about what is in your heart, not whom your heart desires.
It's too late for me.
It is never too late, Kung Jin.
And like, it's honestly so gay.
That's right, beautiful people, the world can be safe. Going back to Shera, the series takes the standards and expectations and puts them upside down. Not only giving proper attention to the LGBTQ+ characters, as well as giving them roles of extreme relevance, such as warriors, paternal figures, or even villains. And now I'll put a little spoiler warning because I'll talk about something that happens at the very end of the show. But look, if you're following the events of the story and what I'll say will sound like a revelation, come on guys, someone's not paying attention. And besides, maybe it will be another reason for you to watch the show. But anyway, here's the timer. In truth, a great victory for Shera is that the main character of the story, Adora, in other words, Shera herself, starts a romantic relationship with Catra at the end of the series. And that's very interesting for two reasons. First, it is not something left for the very last second, like a surprise or plot twist, but something that is built across the whole story and properly represented, with demonstrations of affection and everything. As we say in the legal and juridical sphere, yes indeed, there is smooching. Second, and maybe even more important, we're not dealing with a secondary character, it's about the protagonist and her rival. The two characters always in the spotlight and with higher screen time. It may seem unnecessary to address it, but it means a lot when the representativity is at the center of the promotional material and of the story. Beautiful people, we are dealing with something on the level of Naruto and Sasuke, but instead of not going forward with the romance that everybody wants to happen, here things do go ahead. Although, in Naruto, it didn't take long to show the kiss, so credit to where credit's due, I guess. A personal belief that I hold very dear is that everyone can change. Please, keep in mind that I'm using can in the sense of possibility. There is no duty, guarantee, nor certainty. Putting differently, I do believe that everyone can change, but it doesn't imply that everyone won't nor will. And the notion of having the opportunity to change and embrace it, or not, permeates the whole third season and overflows until the last one of the series. See, more than ever, many characters see themselves before the decisions that bring the possibility of altering the paths that their lives took. Without a doubt, one of the greatest surprises is the deepness and melancholy of the supposed main villain, Hordak. In the beginning, he was treated as a figure of absolute authority, practically a final boss. However, as we spend time seeing how his routine is and what his objectives are, that perspective is completely changed. We find a fragile character, both physically and emotionally, who, instead of being something mighty and powerful, is just one of many clones of the real villain, being tossed aside by the fact that he is considered effective. Even more surprising is the touching subplot regarding a deep relation which grows between him and Princess Entrapta. Said relation is born from mutual, let's say, intellectual admiration, and evolves until they allow themselves to show their insecurities and comfort each other.
Imperfection is what makes scientific experimentation possible. Imperfection is beautiful. At least to me. Stand here!
Look, there's this thing in Season 1 concerning the princess attacking the Horde and Entrapta staying behind, among other stuff. We can see him as a mirror of the personal conflict that Catra goes through, in the sense that both have as a final goal having their valor acknowledged by the figures who they, lacking a better word, admire. And regarding her, we have an interesting development of her personal story. When she finally gets the recognition and somewhat affection that she craves, then throw it all away. In this moment of the plot, Catra and Scorpia are in the Crimson Waste, searching for technologies of the first ones. Putting differently, they go to a multicultural, furry, and equally gay version of Mad Max, looking for something useful.
But only one can have his way.
What happens is that Catra manages to subjugate the leader of one of the biggest gangs in the Crimson Waste, and obtains the admiration and loyalty of the inhabitants. On this moment, she finally sees herself free of the expectations and the negativity that the struggle in the name of the Horde brings. So much so that Scorpia, seeing who she considers one of her best friends finally happy, states that they don't need to return to the old life.
This is the happiest I've ever seen you! Scratch that. This is the first time I've ever seen you happy, period.
But demonstrating how years of toxicity can deeply bitter someone, when she captures Adora and finds that Shadow Weaver also abandoned her in order to join the rebels, Catra throws out the opportunities to live far from the conflicts of the world and returns to the Horde, motivated not by political or military power, but by the wish to hurt those that in fact she loves. Adora, in her turn, carries an interesting dilemma in the sense of wanting to change what is expected from her. Nevertheless, a greater focus must be given for the subversion of the trope of the chosen hero with the great destiny. Following the discoveries during the season, Adora suspects that her role in the story is not as one noble and fearless defender, not even that her real purpose is something that good. And since we're discussing the idea of following your own path, let's break a little the flow of this analysis talk. Because the new Shera series has many sources of inspiration, taking surprising paths. But I didn't expect one of those to be, well, the end of Evangelion.
Hey, Adora.
Across the duration of the series, there is a growth not only of the story itself, but in the responsibilities that each character carries along. Without a doubt, who better represents an interesting paradigm shift is the character of Glimmer. After the events of the last season, she assumes the role of her mother as the Queen of Brightmoon and inherits not only the kingdom, but also the personality of the Queen Angela. Following the progression of the season, we can see the relation that Glimmer had with her mother on the very first episodes being reflected in the way she interacts with her friends, especially Adora. In the conflict against the Horde, her orders and advices are constantly ignored, and her role as a warrior or hero gives place to one as manager. As the obligations and the pressures of leadership start to weigh on her, Glimmer molds herself more and more in the shape of her motherly figure. Such transformation can be seen going beyond the events of the story. The choice of words, her appearance, and even the way she is framed show the resemblance between them. A great merit in the manner that the series presents its characters can be seen here, since her flaws and mistakes, while not entirely justifiable, are comprehensible and treated with empathy. Curiously, at this point in the story, Catra is the one with an arc that is extremely similar to hers. Just like the new Queen of Brightmoon, the Horde's second-in-command has her frailty and fragility more visible thanks to the weight that the power and authority bring. Not only that, since she carries the fear of being abandoned and hurt, during the whole story she nurtures an idea of having her objectives being always in the first place, above any and all. So much so that, in this scene, she could be talking to herself.
You and me, we don't need anyone. Forget them all! No one matters! Nothing matters but this mission! You want to prove yourself? Prove your worth? Then do it! You and I are going to conquer Etheria, and then they'll all see!
Alright, that vision gets in direct conflict with Scorpia. Even though she has a heart of gold and cherishes deeply the one she considers a great friend, she realizes that a huge part of the care and attention are simply not corresponded, seeing herself engaged in a toxic friendship with Catra. This makes her follow on Adora's footsteps and leaves the Horde to join the rebellion, not wishing to fight against her old home, but instead to learn how to be a better person for herself and, in some way, help her friend. Besides, there is also that deal concerning helping Entraptan and all that. I do believe that here is the best place to focus on the theme of the effect that positive influence can have over someone. Time and time again, it is shown how uncertainties and insecurities can be understood and even overcome by the mere contact with comprehensible people and an environment more welcoming. As it was said before, having Glimmer as inspiration, Frosta manages to leave her bubble and externalize her personality. Another aspect is how Scorpia, being physically different from the others, feels accepted and cared by the princesses. Even clearly evil characters have a considerable improvement, be the renewed confidence of Hordak, found after he accepted his imperfections, or by the almost sorta kinda glimmer of decency of Shadow Weaver. But okay guys, enough talking about nice things, let's go back to the misery. Catra finds herself in a situation where her only bounds are mercenaries and marauders, whose loyalty lies with whoever pays more or has more power. With that in mind, her obsession and paranoia take a visible toll on her life, culminating in one of the best scenes of the series and what can be considered one of the best regarding this type of personal journey.
Farther inland, everything is under control.
Excellent. Etheria will be ours yet.
Something quite peculiar happens in Adora's personal story, completely shattering any pretensions of this being a classic chosen hero plot. After discovering the real purpose of carrying the sword and the title of Shera, her personal conflict stops being to achieve what was expected from her as Shera and becomes quite the opposite. How to live behind the expectations put by the others and follow her own path. In order to do so, she goes against all the plans made for her and, in an absolute act of rebellion, destroys the thing which holds her to the expectations imposed to her, figuratively and literally. In that instant, having built a world of conflicts, risks, and objectives, the story then throws it all out by introducing a threat with a magnitude that makes everything up until that point trivial. And it's in the time of absolute danger, which makes previous battles seem so irrelevant, that the characters finally assume control over their lives. Listen, there are two quite relevant literary concepts in the construction of a narrative: buildup and payoff. The buildup is nothing more than the accumulation of tension and/or events in a story so that they may be released or result in a payoff, which is the consequence of everything that was accumulated or built up. A great example of how both concepts can be applied is the introductory level of Doom 3.
Environment Management Office.
You need to report to Sergeant Kelly ASAP.
As a game of the Doom franchise, you expect immediate combat, but the totality of the first level is dedicated to create tension, allowing you to explore casually the labs at Mars, talking with the scientists and hearing the mechanical whispers of the installation, as you realize that there is something quite wrong behind those walls.
You're processing. Please proceed directly to reception.
Get out of here.
And then a hell gate opens, almost everybody dies, and the game becomes Aliens. See? Build up?
Welcome to Mars. First time?
And payoff. So, the last season of Shera is nothing more than a gigantic payoff of everything that was built in the rest of the series, where each combat, character, drama, and relation is put at stake and culminates in an ending that elevates the series to the level of, well, some other cartoons. There is no more greatness, no more legends, nor myths. All the imposing kingdoms are now nothing more than camps and bases, hidden from an evil of such impossible proportions that the only thing stopping the complete annihilation of the planet is its convenient purpose. A weapon, simple as that. A weapon of absolute power and capable of destruction in a galactic scale, having Shera as its trigger and with the noble function of being used and discarded. That was the plan of the wise and mysterious first ones. And just like the first ones, that plan is now part of the past. Having destroyed the sword and her connection with Shera, Adora and the rebellion face an enemy with unparalleled military strength, and one that also has the power to literally control hearts and minds. And it's in this setting that the story manages to shine in two different ways. First, every character has the chance to face whoever they were up until that point and the choices they've made, allowing themselves to externalize their fears and weakness, becoming stronger. Second is the way the story treats the act of forgiving. There's no easy way or answer for forgiveness. It is not something that happens from one day to another. The characters that receive forgiveness go through a long path to accept it and deserve it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry.
I forgive you.
While the ones that can offer it feel and know that it's not something simple to do.
I should have listened to you, and I'm sorry. You get to be mad for as long as you need to be. But I'm not going anywhere. And when you're ready, I'll be here.
Through this context, one of the final possible themes of the story can be perceived: the possibility to deny that which is considered destiny. The very own conflict with the real villain, Horde Prime, is an act of revolt against what is considered absolute and unchangeable. In the instant when his never-ending armies march across Etheria and his will is placed above any and all, the battle was already lost. Yet, the rebellion adapts, resists, and overcomes. But let's not forget that it's in the main duel where resides the ideal of being better than what the world and the society expect from us. Although the world has given all the reasons to follow on the steps of her mentor and to become someone broken and bitter, Catra illustrates the long and delicate process that is to redeem oneself and to aim to become a better person. For the duration of the last season, we accompany her as she faces her mistakes and fears, not with the intention of erasing or forgetting, but trying to accept and use them as a starting point to a difficult yet necessary transformation. She also changes her hair. And if there is something that I've learned from years and years of anime, is that it's a synonym of evolution. Now, with Adora, things are a little bit different, but equally cool. After destroying their sword and the First One's plan, she also destroyed her reason to be. However, it's right there where the beauty of her story resides. Along her journey, she always wielded the sword and the will of the First Ones, believing them to be the reasons why she was able to become Shera. But that wasn't true. She always was capable of that. The sword was nothing more than a way to control it, and by breaking it, Adora loses the power to transform, not because she lacks the tools, but because she does not have something that motivates her. And this emptiness created by the loss of a motivation starts being filled by the appreciation that she has for herself and by the love for those she cares about. And the nicest part of this crazy mumbo-jumbo that I'm saying is that it's something represented visually, by the form she takes when becoming Shera. While using the sword, her appearance, although really cool, has nothing to do with who Adora really is, because she's not doing for her. But in the moment when she starts to fight for her own reasons and for those dear to her, her appearance finally reflects that, from the fact that she maintains her hair to how the new details reference the ones closest to her, Bow, Glimmer and Catra. I'd like to say that I've came to this conclusion about how her clothes reflect her friends all by myself and show off my literary skills. But I owe that to an excellent interview with the series creator. And more than putting an end to the threat of Horde Prime, the great triumph of the heroes of the story was being created way back, in 1985, in a work that was nothing more than a glorified commercial, having unexpectedly released themselves from the shackles put on by the expectations of their creation, and walking their own path, carrying with them their own meanings and values. And just like its characters, the new Shera series performs a feat that is equally singular and inspiring: the denial of its destiny. You know what, beautiful people? I like the new Shera. I can't precise if it's the messages, the art, the journey, or if it's the fact that everybody's just too damn cute. I share the belief that whenever things look a tad bit hopeless, the ideas that we are capable of becoming better people, and that we have the ability to make, even if it's on a tiny scale, the world a more pleasant place, are good things to be reminded of. And that's it, beautiful people. I'm really grateful for sticking with me in this conversation, and I do hope from the bottom of my heart that you like it. And only if you want it, obviously. It would be pretty cool if you could like, share, subscribe and follow on Twitter. Oh, and talking about nice stuff? After months of complex engineering and studies about the nuances of human behavior, the multicultural team behind Crônica Digital, that's Digital Chronicle, has prepared something that you always wanted but never knew you needed. Yes, our channel's official Instagram is now live. So, only if you wish to do so, you could go to the description and take a peek at this brand new world of social network. Wow! Posting things through the cell phone. What a world, people. What a world.